Your brain is going to always look to prove you right. So be very mindful of the messages that you tell yourself, right? If you tell yourself, I can't accomplish that goal, your brain is going to look for every reason that you are right. But if you tell yourself, no, I'm going to be able to make that $1 million this year, your brain will start pointing out opportunities for you in order for you to make that happen. So you've got to be very, very mindful about the message that you're telling yourself. And this is why things like affirmations are so important, right? Because if you're telling yourself things like, "Oh, I'm fat," or I'm not smart," right? Your brain is going to be like, "Yeah, remember when you were in kindergarten and you got a 60 on that test?" I'm sure they don't give tests in kindergarten, but but it's an
Yeah.
example, right? Then you're going to be like, "Oh, see, like I've never been smart," right?
Mhm.
But if you tell yourself things like, "Man, I'm brilliant," you're going to start thinking about that problem that you solved a couple of years ago, that really great impact you had on somebody's life. If you tell yourself
Mhm.
things like, I'm going to be successful or I'm already successful, your brain is going to look for examples to prove you right.
You're listening to the Black to Business Podcast, an educational podcast providing Black entrepreneurs with the tools and resources to start and grow their businesses. We chat with vetted Black entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and business owners as they provide tips and resources to help take your business to the next level. I'm your host, Monique T. Marshall. Welcome back. So today's topic will be pretty interesting and in a good way, so stick with me. So as someone in the business world, you likely often hear about how you and your business must evolve continuously because evolution is what leads to success, whether it's in life, whether it's in business, or whether it's in both. You have to evolve and you have to do things differently. So I like to understand why things are the way that they are and how they happen the way that they do. So I thought it would be important to discuss and truly understand, where does that evolution start? So of course, as the business owner, you're the leader and the evolution starts with you because you're the one with the vision and making the decisions. And now that we know that it begins with you, the question then becomes, where does it start within you? The answer is that it starts with that 3-pound organ inside of your head called the brain. So sometimes we like to get super nerdy over here on the Black to Business podcast. So I thought we need to talk about the brain and truly understand how it shapes our future, how it shapes our life, and ultimately how this affects your business and your success. So today on the podcast, we've invited Dr. Philippe Douyon, a board-certified neurologist. He's also the founder of the Inle BrainFit Institute, a health, wellness, and technology company designed to improve people's health and quality of life. He's also the author of the book Neuroplasticity, Your Brain's Superpower, which speaks to the brain's ability to adapt, learn, and heal. And his expertise lies in helping high performers and entrepreneurs crack the code to become more productive and successful by becoming the leaders that their brain needs them to be. He does this by teaching people how to take charge of their brains in order to overcome the challenges and create the lives they dream of. So we're all about helping you create a life and a business of your dreams, and Dr. Douyon is definitely going to break it down in this episode on how you can do that. So we're diving into how the brain actually works and why success starts with the brain. He's providing tips on how to rewire your brain to create a life you love and how to actually understand your brain's superpower and so much more. So I'll say that this is definitely one of my favorite conversations and it is a treat, so let's dive in.
Philippe, welcome to the Black to Business podcast. I am so excited to have you on the show today. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, me too. Me too. It's a nitty-gritty conversation about your expertise is understanding the brain and how we can use it to tap into our superpower as well as reach our goals in life and success in our business. So I am so excited as well. But before we dive into the topic, I like to always ask my guests if you could share briefly, I know we're going to get into it further in the conversation, a little bit about who you are, how did you get where you are today, and what is it that you do in your business?
Sure. So my name is Dr. Philippe Douyon. I'm a board certified neurologist. I'm the author of the book Neuroplasticity, Your Brain's Superpower. I'm the creator of the online course Take Charge of Your Brain, in which I work with high achievers in order for them to hack their brains so they can create the businesses and the lives that they want for themselves. I'm also the creator of the children's illustrated series, Nuri the Neuron. And I've got a new ebook out called Change Your Brain, Change Your Life.
Ooh, I like the sound of that. Change your brain, change your life. Love that. So let's dive into today's topic. I like to always, I know some people might understand what a neurologist is and what they do, but then there are some people that don't understand the gist of it. So let's break it down, your journey and your experience, so that a fifth grader can understand. So, Dr. Philippe, if you could begin by discussing what a neurologist does and how they really assist individuals in taking charge of their brains.
So neurologists, so we're doctors like your primary care doctor or your cardiologist, but
Mm-hmm.
we specialize in taking care of people who have neurological disorders or problems with their brain, problems with their spinal cord, problems with the nerves uh, throughout their entire body. So we take care of people that have had strokes. We take care of people who have seizures,
Mm-hmm.
Parkinson's, MS, a whole host of neurological disorders, as well as people who have things like headaches and back pain.
Got it. And what inspired you to pursue this as a journey and a career?
So when I was younger, I had a cousin who had epilepsy, so she had seizures, and
Mm-hmm.
she did eventually grow out of it. And then I had a grandmother who developed Alzheimer's disease. And while those two are two really devastating diseases for obviously the person to go through, but also as a family member, there was that part of me that was kind of like, man, when the brain works the way that it's supposed to, it's just this incredible thing. And so that was really like what got me interested in going into neurology. And then when I was in medical school and started to learn more about the brain, I just became more and more fascinated.
Interesting. And so you mentioned earlier that you're the founder of the Inle BrainFit Institute. So what inspired you to start your company and kind of talk about the mission and some of your offerings?
Sure. So for a while, I worked in private practice. Um, by training, I am a neurologist. I see people with all types of neurological disorders, but in this practice, I was also a epileptologist, so specializing in people with seizures. And
Mm-hmm.
the thing that I found in patients that I was taking care of is that choices and things that they were doing every single day in their life that was impacting their neurological health, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so getting somebody to exercise had a major impact on the health of their brain as compared to just giving them a pill, right? Or getting
Mm,
somebody to think about things differently, getting somebody to eat differently, getting somebody just to get enough sleep at night. All of that
right.
had a significant impact. And so I knew I wanted to create more of like a wellness company and a tech company. And so that's why I created the Inle BrainFit Institute. Initially, when I created it, I was creating exercise regimens for my patients based on their medical and neurological needs. And I had
Mm-hmm.
a health spa right next to me, and my patients were able to go in and work out in that health spa. I had worked out a deal with them. And then it sort of evolved, and I was also helping them with their nutrition. Eventually, I created an app called Dr. Duyon's BrainFit, which is like a medical Candy Crush to teach people about
Okay.
all the things that impact their neurological health. And
Mm-hmm.
then, ended up writing my book and then ended up creating an online course.
Wow, just all of the things that people need to, it makes me think about knowing your lane and just really honing in on your lane. And I know you mentioned earlier the fact that you focus on high performers. How did you kind of like find your audience when it came to this space?
Yeah, so initially I was focusing on just patients with chronic illnesses, right? Because that was
Mm-hmm.
a lot of what I was seeing in the hospital. But aside from being a doctor, I'm also a patient, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
was diagnosed with kidney failure when I was 18 years old. Today I'm
Wow.
43. At
Wow.
the age of 28, 8 days after graduating from medical school, I got a kidney transplant from my father. Um, and throughout the entire time, right, I was in college, going through college, then I was going through medical school, and then I did fairly well for quite a number of years with the kidney transplant. And then last year got hit with COVID, completely wiped out whatever kidney function I had left, ended up on dialysis. And I was blessed enough to have another kidney transplant. And so throughout this time, I'm still working, I'm still sort of producing, I'm still being impactful in people's lives. And then I thought, well, I'm kind of like a high achiever, right? I'm an entrepreneur.
Right.
I've accomplished some things. Let me use both my personal and professional experience to help a much wider audience and not just people with chronic illnesses. So that's how I went about starting to help high achievers.
And so you also mentioned the fact that you released a book, Neuroplasticity, Your Brain Superpower, which speaks to the brain's ability to adapt, to learn, and to heal. Can you talk about what the book is about and kind of what you wanted the reader to take away from the book?
Yeah, so for a really long time, we thought that our brains were stagnant, that the only time they ever changed is like if you got a traumatic brain injury and you lost some brain cells, or you got something like Alzheimer's disease and you lost a whole bunch of brain cells. But now we know that our brains are constantly changing. They're constantly evolving. And they do so with every thought we have, every action that we take, every conversation we take part in. Right. And we're capable of making new neurons, new brain cells, and new connections amongst those brain cells our entire life. And what's beautiful about that for me, and this is the big sort of takeaway, is that if our brains are capable of evolving, that means that we're capable of evolving. That means that we're meant to evolve as a society, but more importantly, as an individual. Right. And so that's the big takeaway for people.
So how do you get people to, if you could just speak on your expertise in getting people to learn how to leverage that power and really understand, like tapping into that?
Yeah. So, the amazing thing about it is that there are things that we can do every single day that sort of change our neurological destiny and have a significant impact on how our brains evolve, right? And it's not like rocket science. It is literally exercising on a daily basis, right? That is the biggest promoter of neuroplasticity, which is your brain's ability to make new neurons and make new connections, your brain's ability to learn and to adapt and to heal, right? It's making sure that you're getting enough sleep. When we're getting into the deeper stages of sleep, that's when your brain is clearing out the toxins that have built up from the work it's done throughout the day. That's when it's making new brain cells. It's finding ways to minimize stress, because chronic stress kills neurons, kills brain cells. It's constantly learning and constantly evolving. So it's really about teaching people to think about their health, their brain, and their life in just a completely different way, in a way that's super natural, right? I mean, everybody's sort of looking for a quick fix, whether it's a pill or the latest fad or whatever it is. But the reality is, I don't know if people in your audience believe in God or a higher power, but the reality is that our bodies have been uniquely designed to give us everything that we need to be as healthy as possible, to be as creative as possible, and to be impactful as possible.
So would you say that that's the brain's superpower, like tapping into the superpower? Because I'm trying to understand also, like, what do you mean by your brain's superpower, and would that be tapping into that superpower?
Yeah, so the brain's superpower is that it is capable of changing. It is capable of evolving. It is capable of healing, right? And it's capable of constantly learning. So many people feel like, the life that they live today is the life that they're destined to live forever, right? Or so many people, it's like whatever happened to them in their past dictates who they are. And that's not the case at all, right? We're all capable of changing and evolving. And I think that there's great power in that.
Yes, I agree. So what you allow people to do is that realization. What you help people do is have that realization that it's possible.
Correct. Yep.
Love it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of understanding. We've kind of touched on it, the power of the brain. So tell us, like, how does the brain work? Like, you also touched on how it affects our health a little bit, but just really tell people, like, how does the brain work?
Yeah. So first and foremost, the primary responsibility of your brain is to keep you safe, right? And if you allow your brain to do so, in an effort to keep you safe, it will minimize any risk that you take, right? Which in certain settings, that's great, right? Probably, you know, a couple 100,000 years ago, if human beings were encountering saber-toothed tiger, I'm not sure if they lived in the same time period, but if they were, right, then yeah, you need to be sort of you need to do everything you could to be safe, right? Because you don't know when that saber-toothed tiger is going to attack. Um, you don't know, you know, you're constantly migrating to experience new sort of lands and to make sure that you and your family are staying safe. But sometimes that holds us back in life, right? People are terrified to have new experiences. One of the things that I always find really interesting is that you have a lot of people that will come to me and they'll be like, Dr. Douyon, I really want to change my life. And that's like, that's great. But they have the same routines. They wake up every single morning. They do the same thing. They go to the same job for like 30 years. They interact with the same people. They go to the same locations. They never do anything new or different. And it's like, well, if you're not doing anything new, how do you expect your life to change? Right? And our brains are considered to be the most complicated structure in our entire solar system. We have anywhere between 60 to 100 billion neurons in our brain. And that's not even the primary cell type in our brain. We've got what we refer to as glial cells. Glial cells are there to essentially support neurons, to take care of neurons, right? And they outnumber neurons on a scale of 9 to 1, 10 to 1. And then amongst neurons, you have trillions of connections. So think about this. You've got 60 to 100 billion neurons. You've got glial cells that outnumber neurons on an order of 10 to 1. You've got trillions of connections, right? All within this 3-pound organ within your skull. And so it's considered to be incredibly complicated, and it's incredibly powerful. And if you know how to take charge of your brain, you're going to be able to accomplish anything. You know, I often compare our brain to like a 2-year-old kid throwing a tantrum, right? Like if you let it, it will take you down a dark, deep hole very quickly, right? Think about like if you're having a fine day, but somebody comes in and like pisses you off. And in that moment, right, all of a sudden, not only are you upset at the person, right, then you start being like, oh, the world sucks. Then you start thinking about everything wrong in your life and you're like, I suck, right? Like that one moment can take you down such a dark, deep path so quickly if you are not taking charge of your brain, if you're not being the leader that your brain needs you to be. And a lot about what I talk about is about becoming the leader that your brain so desperately needs you to be.
Right. Yeah. And so how does this, because it also makes me think about all of the powerful, like you said, this 3-pound, the power, and how we often hear about like how this affects our health. And when you speak about a lot of times people don't do things differently, and I'm speaking in terms of like, especially our audience of business owners, they want this different result, but they're not doing things differently, and how that can, if you could speak to how that will affect their health and their ability to, like you say, show up as the best leader. And, you know, eventually this can create that depression, I think, or that inadequacy that people feel.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, so I mentioned before that the brain is capable of evolving. And in fact, you know, that's one of the purposes of the brain. But when people say to me like, Dr. Douyon, what is the meaning of life? To me, the meaning of life is evolution, and not evolution of the species, but evolution of the individual, right? And you find that a lot of people are just not evolving. They are staying stuck, right? And this is true for entrepreneurs, right? They stay stuck in a project, whether that project is successful or not, they are stuck in it. They're not evolving to the next project, right? They're not learning new things. They're not learning new skills, you know? So, and that stuff has a significant impact. A story that I often tell people is a few years ago, I went to this lecture taught by this doctor who was like this memory specialist. And the way that he talked about memory, right? He was so deep into that jargon that as a neurologist, I was like, dude, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm not even sure you know what you're talking about at this point, right? So a little while later, he retires and he comes to see me. And he comes to see me because he's having memory problems. Here is this memory expert who this is what he did his entire career and is now having memory problems. And you'd be like, well, how is that even possible? And it's
Right.
possible because he never did anything new. All he did was focus on his research, which was memory. He never, by not doing anything new, he never created new neurons and new connections in his brain. And so once he left work, dementia started to kick in.
Wow. This is okay. So, okay, well, how does that relate to you hear this thing in the business world of focusing on that one thing?
So you can certainly focus on that one thing, right? But how
Mm-hmm.
long are you going to focus on that one thing for?
Well, what does that
Right?
one thing look like, I guess?
I guess it depends on what the person is trying to pursue,
Uh-huh.
right? Because you do need to evolve. You do need to learn new things over time, right?
Right.
But certainly focusing is incredibly important to accomplish a project, right? But
Right.
there should be sort of like a due date, right? There needs to be a time where you're going to decide to do something else, right? For me,
Mm-hmm.
this idea that we stay in a business or in a company doing the same thing for 30 or 40 years until we retire, to me, like that does not work, right? Because that's when we start seeing a lot of things like cognitive issues, memory problems, dementia start to set in.
Mm. So would it be, for example, I'm just thinking of all the things that people might be thinking right now, even myself. So would it be maybe if this person had this business, so you're thinking about, okay, I'm building this business, I'm creating this business, a legacy building business. And so is it the fact that evolving, as we spoke about, is introducing new things
It can
or
be.
it's okay.
It can be introducing new services, new products into your business, right? Thinking outside the box, right? So even I started out, right, seeing patients the way every doctor sees patients, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I sort of, at some point, I left private practice around 2018. And one of the reasons why I left was because I'm like, oh my God, I am having the same conversation with different patients every single day. And sometimes I'm having the same conversation with the same patient, right? Like I am
Right.
bored. I am not
Uh-huh.
inspired. I am not learning anything new, right?
Mm.
So stepping into the business world, I had to learn about business, right? I created an app, right, that I mentioned before. So I had to
Mm-hmm.
work with people, and that was completely new for me, right? I had to write a book and learn that, like that sort of industry. That was completely new for me, right? Creating an online course. I actually don't really even go to medical conferences anymore. Like, if
Oh
anything, I
wow.
go to business conferences. I go to
Mm-hmm.
conferences where I know I'm for sure going to learn new things and interact with people that who don't think like I do.
Right.
Um, right? And so those things are really important, right? And so now it's like I've got all these other things happening in my business, but essentially I am providing the same information,
Right.
right? But I'm doing it in different ways, right? I've got my podcast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so I'm doing all these different things. So my day does not always look the same. And I still see patients, actually. I still see patients about 10 days out of the month. And the funny thing is, so I see patients virtually, and a few weeks ago, my sons were here that were listening to me seeing patients, and before I could say what I was going to say to the patient, my son verbatim said what I normally say to patients, and I thought to myself, "Oh my God, I need to get out this job."
Oh, won't kids tell you? Won't they let you know?
Yeah,
Kids.
you know,
That is funny. Yeah. I think that's a full circle because it's like you said, it's introducing the new services, but you're still in this industry where people know you as the expert for this. So
correct.
love it. And Dr. Douyon, why do you believe that success in business and life starts with the brain?
Because success starts with the thoughts that you are first having.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it is estimated. Somebody, I don't know how they came up with this number, but somebody estimated that we have 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts every single day. Right?
Wow.
And out of those 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts, 95% of them are the same exact thoughts we had the day before, right? So if people are having the same exact thoughts they had the day before, no wonder why people's lives are not changing the way that they want them to, right? Because our thoughts dictate the actions that we're going to take. Out of those 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts, 60 to 70% of them are negative, right? And then you look and you're like, well, no wonder people's lives aren't changing, and no wonder a lot of people are not happy with the lives that they do have. And so it really all starts with the thoughts that we are having about our lives, about our businesses, about our health, about the world. And our thoughts are so important that businesses all around the world are spending trillions of dollars in order to be able to influence our thoughts. Right? Our thoughts are so important that from the moment you are born, people are trying to influence your thoughts. First, it might be your parents, right, and family members. Then, as you get a little bit older, it becomes your teachers, right, and certainly society. Then it's your bosses, right? Then it's advertising agencies. Like everybody is trying to influence your thoughts, and people are just not mindful about how powerful their thoughts are. They're just letting everything in.
Right. And one of the things you also spoke about earlier was the fact that we have the ability to create this life that we want, but it does require for some people doing something, of course, differently. So how do you advise people rewire their brain to create this life that they love? Like, what are some of the things that they could do?
So have different experiences, right? So break up the routine. I tell people all the time, you know how they say like we are creatures of habit?
Right.
Well, I tell people that being a creature of habit is it's killing your neurological destiny. Like you have to have new experiences, right? New experiences will also foster new thoughts and therefore new actions. You want to make sure like the people that you have around you, that's incredibly important. You know how they say, you know, if you're surrounded by 5 rich people, you're going to be the sixth. Or,
Right.
you
Yep.
know, if you're surrounded by 5 bad people, you're going to be the
Yes.
sixth. The reality is, the reason that that is true is because we have these neurons in our brains called mirror neurons, right? And we can see them at play. If you and I are in the same room and I scratch my nose, you're more likely to scratch your nose, right? It's thought that these neurons are there to sort of elicit empathy in each other, but they also mimic the actions that people take, right? So they start acting like the people around them. Also, these neurons start firing at the same frequency of as the people you spend the most time with. Right? So your brain cells literally change to mimic that of the people that you're around. It changes your thoughts to mimic that of the people that you're around. And the actions that you take start to mimic the people that you're around as a result. And so you have to be incredibly mindful of who you have around you as well.
Yeah. And speaking of which, you also spoke about the fact that there are companies that are creating businesses around trying to influence our thoughts and how we do things. And much of our listeners are business owners who are doing the same, basically. So why do you think it's important for business owners in particular to really understand how the brain works and also how important it is for them to reach their goals?
Yeah, if you understand how the brain works, then, you know, the reality is you'll understand how to enroll more people, get more customers, get more clients, have more people buying the services and the products that you provide, right? Because you'll understand how to market to their subconsciousness. And it is thought that 95% of our behaviors come through our subconsciousness, right? So ultimately, understanding how somebody's brain works will make you more successful.
Got it. And so in your experience, what are some of the common mistakes? Because you mentioned you do work with high performers that you see that they make when it comes to meeting their goals and not really focusing and prioritizing understanding the power of their brain.
Yeah, I think a lot of times they're not learning new skills, right? So they're just into, you know, whatever it is that they're good at. And that's what they sort of stick to, and they're not learning new things. I think also, not only are they not sort of learning new things, they're not taking great care of themselves either, right? So they're not often exercising. They're not often eating healthy. They're not often minimizing stress and making sure that they get enough sleep. I was doing an IG Live yesterday. We had a nurse on where, we were talking to her about the importance of needing to take care of herself so that way she can take care of others, right? And a lot of entrepreneurs aren't necessarily doing that. They're not taking care of themselves.
Right.
So those are some of the common mistakes that I'll see. One, they're not learning anything new. They're not taking really good care of themselves, right? You'll have some entrepreneurs who also, they don't surround themselves with the right people. And the reality is, I mean, we're living in essentially a virtual world, right? You can have mentors that you've never met, right?
Yep.
You can buy their books, you can listen to them on YouTube. So you are able to allow whatever it is that's going to be important to you into your brain. So that way it can influence the way that you think and the way that you act. And some people, they want to, whether it's their childhood friends that they want to sort of bring up with them, whether it is family that they want to bring up with them, they're not willing to be like, okay, I need to keep some of these people at a distance in order for me to be able to create the business and life that I want for myself.
And why do you think that is? I ask that because some people, they struggle with, getting unstuck. They struggle with, maybe it's setting those boundaries so that they can prioritize themselves. And then they also struggle with, like you said, like wanting to, I guess, that connection that they have with people, wanting to keep that connection, even if it's at a cost of success. So why do you feel that is? Is it because that they haven't experienced new things, or they don't know any better, or it's just a mental block?
Well, no, I think that, I think people oftentimes don't allow the right information in. They don't filter out information that's going to be negative for them, right? So you have millions of things competing for your attention every single day. And you have to know what you're trying to filter in or trying to filter out. So for instance, I was talking to somebody recently and they were talking about how much of the news that they watch, right?
Yeah.
I stopped watching the news a couple of years ago. Like, I do not like, I don't watch the news at all. Like, you kind of hear what's going on, whether it's through social media or people will bring it up. But there was a time where I was literally glued to the news, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. Like, I knew every stat and every number. And then I got COVID, right? And I'm a doctor, so I understand how viruses work. But there was part of me that was like, man, I feel like I attracted COVID into my life because like I was just constantly like all about what is going on with COVID, right? And so you have to be very mindful of what you are letting in, right? The same way you have to be mindful of what you're taking into your body, what you're eating. You have to be mindful about what you're letting into your brain. And I feel like a lot of people don't do that. They allow, whether it's family, friends, the news, social media, they allow everything and anything into their brain. And that is going to have a really negative impact.
It's so interesting you say that, because I was just also telling someone the same thing. I'm like, I don't own a TV, but two, I'm like, I don't really watch the news. And then I thought, like, I kind of feel like I know what I need to know, or I only want to know what I need to know, and I sometimes feel like I live under a rock. But it's like, because of like what you're saying, is trying to filter what we take into our lives and our brain is so important so that we can be successful, do the work. So
I'm at the point where I'm like, if you're somebody that I know, you might be somebody that I love. If you're negative, I don't need that negative energy. Like, you need to go over there with that, right? Like, I've got to protect this brain and this mind, right? The same way I need to protect this body.
Right. Yep. And in all of this, can you talk about the impact that this has on decision making?
Yeah. So, one of the things that you find is that people are very slow to make decisions. So right before getting on this podcast with you, I had arranged a meeting with a educational director of a a program that I'm on the board for with a company that provides um, services that I think would benefit our program, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's free to our program. Like there's no downside to this, right? Like you can make this decision right now and we can get this
Right.
going tomorrow, right? And uh, and our director of education was like, okay, well, I've got to think about it. And I'm like,
Mm.
oh my God. Like, I'm like, are you serious right now? Right? And here's the thing. You've got to get into a habit of making quick decisions. If it doesn't
Yeah.
work out, you can always sort of change things, right? But I said before that our brains, the primary purpose of our brains is to protect us. The longer you wait to making a decision, your brain will find every reason for you not to make that decision,
That's
right?
so
In
true.
order to protect you.
Yeah.
But then what does that do? That keeps you stuck. That prevents you from moving forward, prevents you from creating whatever it is that you want to create for yourself. We've got
Mm-hmm.
to make quick decisions
Yes.
and stop wasting time.
That's so true. I could definitely tell your decision. You're like on it. Listen, if I want to do it, I want to do it. If I don't, I don't.
Right.
Um, and I think that's so good. I think that also like one of the things I'm becoming better at that. That's something that I struggle with because of being a perfectionist or having this. It needs to be this way, but I also understand how that impacts my business. So I'm pretty sure other people can relate to that. So quicker making decisions.
Yeah.
Noted.
You want to
Yeah.
make fast decisions. You can always, reverse them if it doesn't go well. But sometimes you
Hmm.
miss out on the opportunity.
Right. Right. Hmm. So let's talk about the work that you are doing. We briefly talked about it, but in addition to being a CEO, you've created a course,
Hmm.
Take Charge of Your Brain, which is helping entrepreneurs crack the code to becoming more productive and more successful by becoming the leaders their brain needs them to be.
Yeah.
So, what does it mean to take charge of your brain?
So what it means is that, so first and foremost, you are not your brain, right?
Mm,
The fact that you are aware of your brain, the fact that you are aware of your thoughts suggests that you are a much higher power than your brain.
mm,
However, if you allow your brain will run your life. And we see this all the time, whether it is people who have a tremendous amount of anxiety. Sometimes you see it in people who are depressed, certainly people who have experienced a lot of trauma. But even day to day, right? We see people where their brains are sort of running their lives, including in people who are not making quick decisions, right? Because then their brains are sort of saying, oh, hold up a second. There's something negative here, and I'm going to find what that negative thing is. Right?
mm. Oof.
So, in my course, what I teach people is first of all the importance of having a mission, vision, and purpose for your life, and the impact that that has on your brain and your neurological destiny. I teach people about all the things that impact the way that your brain evolves and the things that you can do every single day to influence that evolution. And then I talk to people about what I know is the meaning of life, and that is the evolution of the individual and how they can go about doing that. Right. And all of that allows them now to be able to create the business and the life that they want for themselves.
Love it. And so there are those that struggle with the productivity. We talk about the decision making.
Hmm.
But what are some tips and techniques for entrepreneurs to tap into their brain to become more productive in order to become more successful?
Sure. So your brain is going to always look to prove you right. So be very mindful of the messages that you tell yourself, right? If you tell yourself, I can't accomplish that goal, your brain is going to look for every reason that you are right. But if you tell yourself, no, I'm going to be able to make that $1 million this year, your brain will start pointing out opportunities for you in order for you to make that happen. So you've got to be very, very mindful about the message that you're telling yourself. And this is why things like affirmations are so important, right? Because if you're telling yourself things like, "Oh, I'm fat," or I'm not smart," right? Your brain is going to be like, Yeah, remember when you were in kindergarten and you got a 60 on that test? I'm sure they don't give tests in kindergarten, but but it's an
Yeah.
example, right? Then you're gonna be like, oh, see, like I've never been smart, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you tell yourself things like, man, I'm brilliant, you're gonna start thinking about that problem that you solved a couple of years ago, that really great impact you had on somebody's life. If you tell yourself things like, I'm gonna be successful or I'm already successful, your brain is gonna look for examples to prove you right. So you want to be very mindful of what you tell yourself. You also want to be very mindful of what is important to you, right? So there's a
Mm-hmm.
group of neurons in the brain called your reticular activating system, and it is responsible for your level of awareness, right? And it used to be thought that, oh, it's just your level of awareness when it comes to sleep and wake, but that's
Mm-hmm.
not the case. It's about making you aware of the things that are related to the things that are really important to you. So I'll give you an example. So a few years ago, it was around Christmas time, and I was walking by a dealership, a Lexus dealership, and they had this beautiful F Sport. I forgot the brand of the car, right? It
Mm-hmm.
was just beautiful. It was wrapped up in a bow. I mean, looking through like the glass, like it just looked like just a beautiful gift, right? I had never seen this car before, and in that moment, I was
Right.
like, I want this car, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I get the car. Right now, this car is important to me. I'm driving it. All of a sudden, I start seeing this car all over
Mm.
the place, right? And it's not that you know people fell in love with the car the same day that I did and went out and bought it. Like this
Right.
car had been all over the place already, but it's just that
Mm-hmm.
now it was important to me. So my reticular activating system was making me aware every place that that car was,
Wow. That is
right?
so. Mm.
So you have to be mindful of what you're telling your brain is important to you because it will make you aware of everything related to that.
Dr. Douyon, I just want you to know that I'm trying to find the spot where I'm gonna be like, this is a banger, but it's like I have so many parts of this episode where I'm like, that one, that one. You're just giving us all of the things. Like to think about the fact that you said that you're bigger than your brain to even think about the things that you think in
Yeah.
terms of like those thoughts, and it will allow you to create those ways to have that success and figure out a solution to get where you want. That's
Hmm.
deep.
Yeah.
That is so deep.
You were not your brain. Your
Yeah.
brain will tell you a whole bunch of nonsense. You are not your brain.
Mm, I love it. This is so good. And the wonderful thing about the work that you're doing is, in addition to being a CEO and an author of another book, but then also the course, you are the author of a children's illustrated series, as you mentioned in the beginning, You're the
Yep.
Neuron, in order to teach children about their brains and how the decisions they make and the actions that they make impact their brain's health.
Yep.
One, I want to talk about why was it important for you to focus on what inspired the book and inspired you to speak to children?
Yeah. So, I've got two sons of my own. They are 11 and 9, and they are literally like my everything. Like
Mm-hmm.
everything that I
Beautiful.
do is for them. Right. And I find, and I've been doing this since they were small. Like, I'd be looking at somebody's brain from home and I'd have them on my lap and teaching them about the brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as I've evolved in my career, I talk to them about how important their thoughts are every day. I talk to them about how important it is to get their bodies moving every day, and not just because it's great for your body and the aesthetics of your body, but because it's great for your brain. It's great for how your brain evolves, right? So having those kind of conversations with them, I was like, I need to take this and teach kids about this,
Right.
right? Because you are never too early to learn how, you're never too early to learn about your brain. And if I knew when I was a kid what I know now about the brain,
Right.
my life would look super different. I tell my kids all the time, I'd be like a quadrillionaire. like
Right.
like if I knew that thing when I was 10 years old, oh my goodness.
Wow.
you
That's
know?
so beautiful. I love it. I love it. And so we're halfway through the year. And so, what advice can you give for business owners to be brain fit for 2022?
Yeah, so I would say, you know, figure out what you want the rest of your year to look like. And I would certainly put some focus on that. But I would also be place a lot of emphasis on taking great care of you. Develop a
Mm-hmm.
routine that's going to be really great for you. So, for instance, on my best days, I wake up, I pray, I
Mm-hmm.
meditate, I exercise, I make sure I get enough water in, and I have a healthy breakfast all before I start work. Like
Mm,
I will beat the sun up to do that,
right.
right? And that is a routine that sets me up for success. I mean, just getting through that routine, I'm like, man, I've accomplished a lot today.
Right. That
It's
is a
like
lot.
it is 7:30 in the morning. Look what I have accomplished today,
Yes.
right? And it just sets me up for success the rest of the day, right? And
Mm,
along with that, I'll have affirmations that I tell myself. And in fact, what I've now done is I've recorded myself saying my affirmations. So I'll listen to them in the car because I know that 95% of my behavior is based on my subconscious mind. And if I can get certain things into my subconscious and get my brain really believing that, that's the way that I'm going to act. And it filters out everything else that I don't want in there.
mm, powerful. And that makes me think of a question I want to ask you about is understanding because I know I've taken so much away from this conversation, just learned so much. So you've totally changed how I think already within these 40 minutes. So it makes me think about just understanding the basics of things so would you say that understanding the brain is mindset or how does that relate to mindset?
So I think if you ask 20 experts about the mind, you will
Mm-hmm.
get 20 different definitions about the mind,
Mm-hmm.
right? And certainly we have an idea of when somebody says mindset, right? We have an idea of what they're saying. They're really talking about, well, what are the thoughts that you have around this particular thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I can't see your mind. I can't touch your mind. You can't touch your mind, right? But I can
Right.
see your brain, right, through a
Right.
scan. I can see how your brain evolves. I know exactly where your brain is. I have no idea where your mind is, right? And so
Right.
that's why I talk about it in the perspective of your brain and your thoughts. But yeah, you can swap out a lot of what I say and say, oh, he's really talking about mindset.
Mm, but you say I can see. Okay, that makes sense. Get it. Got it. Perfect. And so, if I'm a business owner listening and I am so inspired by this conversation, I know that this is something that I want to work on. I want to work with you. How could you help me? And what are some of your offerings look like, the processes?
Yeah, so that depends on that individual, right? So certainly there's my course, right, that somebody can enroll in. And then there's one-on-one work that they can do with me. But everybody is different, right? This even goes back to when I'm seeing patients from a neurological perspective, right? So somebody can have something like epilepsy, but not everybody who has epilepsy and seizures are the same. Some people with
Mm-hmm.
epilepsy and seizures will have 300 seizures per month, and getting them down to 10 seizures per month significantly improves their quality of life. Somebody else may have, one seizure every 3 months, and you can actually get that person to a place where they're seizure free. So it's going to be different for everybody. I've worked with
Mm-hmm.
people where, they were really stuck for whatever reason, and you know, after we've worked together, they've unleashed their first music album. Or I
Wow.
worked with somebody who could not get pregnant, could not get pregnant. And after
Mm-hmm.
we worked together, she now has 2 children, right? So
Wow.
everyone is different, right? The
Mm,
same way I work with people who have undergone significant trauma. And so their experience and what they need is going to be different. So
got
there's
it.
no one cookie cutter sort of approach. The information in the course, everybody can take from, right? Everybody can take from, well, yeah, maybe I should have a vision for my life. Yeah, maybe I should have, I really should lean into my life's purpose. And my life's purpose can change every few months or every few years or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be stay with me my entire life. Maybe,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I need to be mindful about how my high blood pressure and diabetes is now affecting my health. And I need to take steps every single day in order to get those things under control. And it's not just about the pills that the doctors are giving me, it's about the foods that I eat and the level of exercise that I have, right? Maybe, you know what? Maybe, yeah, everybody needs to look and be like, well, how do I develop my mind, my body, and my spirit, right? So
Mm-hmm.
those are the things that, yes, you are going to get into in the course, but in terms of a one-on-one with me, it's going to be based on what the individual needs.
Love it. And how, in all of the things that you offer, there has to be some kind of systems that help you and some resources that you lean on. If you could share some of your favorite tools or resources that you've used to help you in your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, so one of the things that I use, so I created a digital planner, and it
Ooh.
actually, I do offer it with the course, but it's something that you could type directly into. And every day in that digital planner, not only does it have like a schedule for the day, but
Mm-hmm.
it's to write down what your mission and vision and purpose is. There's an inspiring quote. It's about what your goals are for the day and then what your sort of long-term goals are. And those are just great tools. And there's like a section where every day where you write down what you're grateful for,
Mm-hmm.
right? And those things I feel like just for me, they keep me in a really positive sort of mindset. When I start off the day being grateful for things, and guess what? Some days, what I'm grateful for, I'm like, God, thank you for allowing me to wake up today.
Right.
That is a
Yes.
big one, right? Because I know as a doctor, a whole bunch of people went to sleep last night. They did not wake up this morning. Some people went to
Right.
sleep last night. They woke up this morning with strokes. Half their brain is gone, right?
Hmm.
I'm like, God, thank you for letting me wake up today, right?
Yes.
And that also helps to shape the way that that my day goes, regardless of
Mm.
what else happens, right?
Yep.
So those are the kind of tools that I use. I am very much about exercising. So worked out this morning. I'm actually playing tennis late tonight, right? So I'm getting like two two workouts
Mm.
in today.
You are
That I'm
not
looking forward
playing.
to. I'm not playing. When my sons get out of school, I'm sure they're gonna want to go play basketball. So it's gonna be like three workouts, and they love doing them two against me, trying to go full court. Like
I
that.
love it.
Let me tell you, two kids against one adult going full court. That is a workout.
You can't let them see you sweat, though. You can't let them see you
You know?
sweat.
Yeah. So I'm big on getting my body moving. I'm big on the people that I have around me and the conversations that I'm having. I want them to be positive.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I just don't have the space always for the negativity. And often when I'm seeing patients, right, it's dealing with life and death. It is dealing with negative circumstances. And there's something very humbling that people are allowing you into their lives when they're most vulnerable, but it's also very draining, right? So I
Yes.
need to make sure that I'm taking really good care of myself in different ways.
Mm. I love it. And what advice would you give to someone who was in their first year of business?
I would say do not be so hard on yourself. Do not be so judgmental. You are going to get a lot of things right. There are going to be things
Mm-hmm.
that you don't get right. Business, just like life, is about learning and evolution. This is why most businesses are in that beta phase. Always.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter. They could be, worth billions of dollars. They're still in that beta phase because it's all about evolving. And so if the biggest businesses in the world leave space for evolution, you have to leave that space for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful message. And Dr. Douyon, what does it mean to you to be a Black man in business?
Oh, so first of all, I love being a black man, right? Because I'm literally like, I have overcome so much in my life. There are so
Mm-hmm.
many obstacles that have been placed in front of me from the time that I was a kid. And challenges that I face now seem like nothing. And no matter what it is, I'm like, I'll get through that.
Right.
because of what I've encountered as a Black man, right? There is a strength and a power in me that I feel as a Black man. There's a certain amount of respect that I feel like I command.
Mm-hmm.
There's just, I just feel so blessed in so many ways. And then when I think about my life, right, and I told a little bit about the story of having kidney disease and 2 transplants, it was
Mm-hmm.
2 Black men that saved my life. My father was one. The second one was my cousin-in-law, Scott. So somebody who's not even blood related. But
Yeah.
2 Black men thought so much of me that they were like, no, we need to save his life because he is so impactful and saves thousands of lives every year.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's so powerful. Woo. I love it. I love it. And we are blessed to have you on the show today, giving and pouring and doing what you're doing in the community. We surely appreciate it. I know, again, I've learned so much, and I know the audience is going to take a lot away from this. And I just want to ask you finally, how can people connect with you, find you, and support you? And please mention any upcoming things that you have that people can support.
Yeah, so we actually yesterday just released the 2nd season of our podcast called The Brain
Ooh,
Prophets. It is
okay.
myself, a neurologist. We have an executive coach and a cognitive expert, and we bring on guests all the time and talk how things are just related to the brain. So for Valentine's Day, we had like a sexologist. We've had physicist. So we've had some really just amazing guests. We've had like a psychic, a medium. And we have
Wow.
these really interesting conversations and relate them back to the brain. People can find me on my website, so InleBrainFitInstitute.com, INLE BrainFitInstitute.com. They can email me at Philippe Douyon at gmail.com. They can find me on Instagram. The handle is Philippe.md. They can find me on LinkedIn, on Facebook. So they can definitely find me all over. And my book is on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles. So yeah.
Love it. And I'll be sure to include all of those links in the show notes. Again, thank you so much for being on the show. This has been such a treat, and we really appreciate all the work that you're doing. And please continue to push the community and culture forward. And again, thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
I told you that it would be amazing. I know. So honestly, this was a conversation where even during the conversation, I was having so many aha moments. So I'm sure you had a lot of aha moments too. And I like that Dr. Douyon shared that we are really not our brains and how we really have to be mindful of what we tell ourselves, because our brain is so powerful that it will seek to protect us, even if it means that it's going to hold us back. So we certainly can't have that, and we cannot have you out here holding up the line. People are waiting for you. They're waiting for your business to produce what you produce. So you have to try new things. You have to do things different in order to get different results. We're rooting for you over here, so wishing you the best of luck. There were so many great resources mentioned during this episode, so be sure to check those out by visiting blacktobusiness.com/101. And this has been lovely, so chat with you next week, same time, same place.